What's the worst thing that can happen, right? Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of This New Studio. My name is Tim, the one and only child of Mecha, and on today's episode, we're getting all the gear moved into the studio. Yeah, so if you missed the last episode, we finished all of the major renovations in the studio. We've got it patched, painted, the floor done, the trim done, the bathroom door is all done and installed. So now it's time to move our stuff back into the studio and make it a fully functioning studio again. But before we can do that, we need to get rid of the blue. Yes, the blueberry color is going. If you've missed the previous videos, I've said to you that we're going with some nice shades of gray. The wall color, like you've seen, is a nice kind of middle tone, and then there's a darker accent color that we're going to be painting the tabletops and the shelvings and things like that. So instead of this blueberry color, we're going to go ahead and hit this with a nice dark gray. Now, before we can do that, there's obviously some prep work involved. As you can see, I had to sand this guy down a lot. This is the main 8-foot workbench in my studio, and this actually had a piece of steel sheet laminated onto this, and unfortunately I didn't think ahead when I originally did it, and I laminated that over the screw holes to unassemble this thing. So I had to actually tear that up during the move, which in turn left a lot of goo on the surface here, and it also kind of marred the surface a bit. So as you can see, had to sand that down a lot. I also sanded the entire thing down just to get a better grip for the paint and everything. So did that with my orbital sander with an 80 grit sanding disc on this. Went over the entire surface, and as you can see, a lot of the paint stayed, but sometimes we had to take it down to bare MDF. This is all smooth, and this is going to be paintable and going to be really, really nice once we get 2 coats of paint on here. So not really worried about that. Another thing that we had to do, because I had to take that sheet up in a hurry, there were some gouges that we had to fill. So I had to use wood putty on this and fill in some of the voids and gouges and everything. And those are going to paint over really nicely because, again, I sanded those nice and flat and smooth. One other detail thing that I've been doing to the workbenches and some of the other furniture that I've made inside the studio is giving it a nice chamfer along the edge. And to do that, I just used my little palm sander, or palm router, I should say, with a 45-degree chamfering bit. Just went around. That was super easy, and it gives it, I don't know, it gives it a nice kind of harder edge to it. I don't know. I just like the detail, and with the dark gray, it's going to look really, really good as well. So, with that being said, this tabletop or bench top is ready to be painted. And we're going to tackle that right now. I'm going to show you how we put 2 coats of paint on this thing, and we're going to get this ready for assembly. So let's get into it. Absolutely did not want to lose in this whole redo of things is the front of the long 8-foot workbench. Now, as you can see over the years, this is kind of where I've put stickers that people have sent me from around the world. I didn't want to lose this. This is special to me, right? So we're not going to be using this panel in the 8-foot workbench. we are going to be preserving this and keeping this, and we're going to kind of give this I guess, a special place of honor in the new studio. So what we did is I went ahead and ripped down another strip of MDF and 2x4, and we've got to make some cuts to get it to the proper length to match this. Put that together, paint it, and then slap it onto the new workbench. So let's go ahead, make those cuts, and let's get to it. We went ahead and got those cuts done outside, so we brought everything back in here. Now we have to transfer the location of this 2x4 so the new panel can replicate the spacing and the fitment of the old panel. So we need to transfer some lines. So based on the lineup that we transferred from the old piece onto the new one, I went ahead and drilled small pilot holes from the back to the front. Now I'm going to take a number 8 countersink bit and countersink these holes for the screws. Nice. All right, so now the screws will sit under the surface of the piece, and I'll come back, sand this flat, nice surface. So we got this thing glued and screwed all together with nice strong construction grade screws. Made a little bit of an error on drilling some of the holes here. So just like a model, we're going to use some filler putty to fill up these holes that were accidents. We'll come back, sand them off, and you'll never know they were there. Very similar to working with a seam, right? So you glue it, you seam it, putty it if need be, and then sand it down nice and smooth, paint and primer over top of that, and you'll never know that it was there. Same with this. So let's take a look at that. All right, so as you can see, this is the row right here that was the mistake. When I had this thing flipped over, I accidentally drilled out these 2 rows, but I should have drilled this one and this one. So this is the one that we have to fill. So to do that, we're just going to use some high quality wood filler, and we're going to fill these in, and once you have it sanded down and primed and painted over top of it, you'll never know that these things were there at all. So we get a nice glob of that stuff out here, just on a little putty knife, right? And we just go to town, just fill in these voids. And because these are kind of drilled all the way through, we want to make sure that we press that putty, that filler, into the hole as much as possible. So we want it to get down there as deep as we possibly can so that it is nice and stable when we go to prime or paint over top of this, right? So basically it's just push right down in there, and then you leave a little bit of extra on top to sand that smooth, just like with a seam line. And there we go. Just smooth those out as much as possible to make sanding a little bit easier. But there is our initial fill. And like I said, we'll come back with our orbital sander and an 80 grit sanding disc, and we'll make quick work of this. So it's been a couple hours now, and the filler putty is completely dry. So we're gonna go ahead and sand this down now, bring this flush, and get this panel ready for paint. So, without any further ado, now, to really replicate this panel to the old one of the main features that we're going to have to do is round over the bottom portion of this skirt. The original panel was actually a shelf, an MDF shelf, and it was a bullnose, meaning completely rounded over on both sides on one edge. So to replicate that, we're going to have to do the same thing to this. This is just a strip cut from a MDF sheet, so it's square on all sides. But I've got my 1/4 inch round over bit here in my little palm router, and we're gonna make this work. All right, so looking at this thing, it is looking really, really good, and it's replicated to the old one. So this guy's ready for paint. Let's get to it. Now, one thing I should keep in mind is that since this is raw MDF, meaning that it's not primed or painted or anything, this is probably going to soak up a good 2, maybe even 3 or 4 coats of this paint, just because the MDF surface is so porous. It's just, you know, like I said, it's a medium density fiber board. It's not like wood, where it's a little bit, you know, denser in terms of the grain. This is basically like paper. So it's gonna soak up the paint incredibly fast. So we need to, like I said, probably hit this with maybe 2 or 3 coats, maybe 4, depending on what it looks like and how the finish looks. But this will look really good once we're all done with it. So after 3 good coats of paint, this new panel is ready to go. I had to give it 2 initial coats of paint to basically lock in the MDF and kind of seal it. And then sanded between that coat and the 3rd coat, and now we've got it really, really nice and smooth and to the same level of finish as the already pre-existing and newly painted panels. So only thing left to do now is to put this big beast together. Let's go do it. All right, so moment of truth. We've got the new panel in here, and we need to get it set in and see if this thing fits the way that I hope it should. All right, first set of screw holes lines up perfectly. Let's try the other end. All right, little challenge on that side, but that lines up and it's looking pretty good. Now to put the rest of the screws in, and we're going to get the top installed. All right, you guys, the bench top is in place. Now we just got to screw this thing down. With the top all nailed down and everything in place, the big bench is completely done. And as you can see, starting to move in a little bit here. A little thing that I noticed that I'm gonna have to go back and touch up is that right there. Little paint, little masking tape, no big deal. But for the rest of the studio, take a look at this. Ooh, yeah. It's getting sexy in here, you guys. It's a little bit of a mess, obviously, but starting to move in and get all the stuff in here. Both of those boxes are tools and materials. And then everything else, those boxes under there are also tools and materials. Got the lights ready to go and set up. Waiting on some things to dry out in the garage. And then the next big project that we're going to tackle is refinishing this shelving unit, because the blueberry needs to go and the gray needs to take its place, right? So next thing I'm going to do is roll that out into the garage, start sanding, and get that thing ready to go. But let's take a quick turn around here in the studio, because like I said, it's looking really, really good so far. Got the paint rack all set up and installed, looking really nice. Got all those boxes, well, most of the boxes anyway, out of the backlog closet. But first, let's get this bad boy out in the garage and get it sanded. Now that I've got this monster into the garage, it's time to refinish it. I've already gone ahead and routed the chamfer that has become kind of the signature of the furniture in the studio. So that's all done. Now we need to take this blue down a notch and get this ready for the dark gray. Now, before we hit it with dark gray, we're going to hit the inside with a nice semi-gloss white. Right now, it's kind of a, I don't know, flat, maybe eggshell in there. We're going to get this thing to a nice semi-gloss, and everything that we put inside here will slide in and out really, really nicely. So let's get the sanding done first with our disc sander and an 80 grit disc, and get this thing ready. So now that we've got the outside of the shelf unit completely sanded down, I even filled in a couple spots here on the top. This thing is ready to start taking a look at the inside of the shelves. I noticed when I first built this that I didn't exactly paint it all that well. I think I was in a hurry. So there's a few spots that need to be sanded down because of heavy I guess drips of paint and stuff like that. But we're going to take a look at the inside of this thing. We're going to get it on some boxes, lean it on its back, and start to address the inside and the shelves and all that good stuff. So first things first, we need to get this thing tipped over on boxes so we can actually look inside. So I've actually never done this before, but we're going to use these black 17-gallon totes to support it while it's leaned over. Here we go. What's the worst thing that can happen, right? It works! All right. So we got this thing sanded down. The front is sanded down to 220, everything else down to 80 grit. The outside, easy. the front of the shelves and everything, not that easy. It does help to have a nice oscillating tool to take the front down initially, just to get it down to about 80 grit. And then what I did is I came back with just a 220 grit sanding disc, folded it up, just hand sanded everything. So we got it sanded, it's vacuumed out, it's ready for paint. Let's get to painting the shelves. So cutting in or painting the corners and the edges has got to be the most time-consuming part of painting the inside of this. And it's the most grueling too, because I'm kind of bent over a little bit and reaching down into these shelves with a brush and painting the corners. And it's weird to see how gray the color was originally in here. And I don't think, for the life of me, I don't think that I painted them gray. I'm pretty sure that this was probably just primer. But you can see the massive difference in the, this is just the first coat, mind you, so it's a mess still. But compared, yeah, see there, that's a good comparison between the two, right? So before, after, crazy, right? So, all right, back to painting. So after a few days and 5 coats later, we've got the shelves to the coverage that I want them to look like. So it was a little bit of a challenge, obviously, but they're looking really nice, bright, crisp white, which is exactly what we were going for to match the paint of the trim and other stuff. So the insides are looking really good. So now the task is to paint the outside and paint part of the frame. And as you can see by the green tape here, the froggy tape, I'm starting to mask off because the 2 sets of shelves, the fronts will remain that bright white. The middle support, the 2 sides, top and bottom, will get that gray color, as well as the outside. The kick plate and area down here will also stay that bright white color. So, starting to do the tedious task of masking. Got this side done. We're going to work on this side, show you how to do that, and then we're going to flip it up, put it back on the dollies, and start to go to town with that gray color. Once we get to that step, then we should be in the home stretch of this thing. It should probably only take maybe a day or 2 to get the 2, maybe 3 coats of paint on the gray parts. The hard part was the shelves. That was just absolutely insane, and I don't recommend that to anybody. But let's get to work on masking this half, and then we'll get this thing on dollies, get it painted. So now that we've got this whole thing taped up, masked, it's ready to go. We need to quickly sand the exposed areas down just a little bit to smooth them out a bit. And then we need to flip this guy up and get started on painting it. So let's get to it. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, but I didn't record the first coat of paint on the shelves. So here it is, first coat of paint. I think it looks really good. There are some rough spots that I'm going to sand down with a sanding sponge real quick, just to take kind of the edge off. There's a few spots in here, the edges, things like that we got to take down and smooth out before the next coat. So actually I think there's probably going to be 3 coats of paint on the outside of this behemoth. So without any further ado, let's get to sanding let's put the second coat on. 3 coats of paint later, the tape is ready to come off. The gray is looking good, the white is masked off. Come here, take a look at this. This is really satisfying. Watch this. So, after all the paint is pulled off, we've got a nice finished shelving unit here. So, I really like how these shelves are just stark white in contrast to the outer gray frame. And man, just this gray really looks great. Super smooth. I'm glad I went ahead and sanded everything down nicely between coats and gave it many coats of paint. Well, 3 coats, but the white had what, like 5 coats of paint. So really looking good. I'm very happy with it. Now it's time to get this beast moved in and put in place. Woo! All right, so this thing is a beast, but it's in place. Right up against the workbench, far enough from the big workbench to still work perfectly. I'm glad this is done. This thing is a monster. Probably the single heaviest piece of furniture that I have in this entire studio, mainly because this thing doesn't come apart unlike the other pieces. Like the big workbench comes completely apart. The little workbench, the light booth comes mostly apart. But this thing, this is one solid unit. So I'm glad it's done. I'm glad it's in here. So what we're going to do next, obviously, is store a bunch of crap in here. But we need to get another set of shelves made for the top here so we can store books, hobby magazines, all sorts of other stuff in there so that we can reference on the live streams. Now, one thing that I want to do before we go ahead and make those bookshelves is make a little dolly cart for the computer, right? Now, what I went ahead and did was I moved all the components and everything from this big, massive case into a much more demure, smaller case here so that it would actually fit underneath the desk so that I would have valuable real estate up top. We're back in the garage. I got all the pieces cut for the computer trolley, dolly, whatever we're going to call it. It's mocked up. This is just dry fit with some screws and stuff like that. This is not fine woodworking, so keep that in mind. This is just utilitarian, straight, just simple stuff, gets the job done. But I still like it to look semi-good, so keep that in mind too. But anyway, we got this thing mocked up. It's nice and wide. The UPS, the battery backup will fit nicely in here. I've got a couple filler strips in here to keep the computer case nice and centered on here. And I think this is going to work perfectly. Got some tiny little casters for this thing earlier today. We're going to go ahead and screw those on once this thing is all done. And so the next step is now to take this thing apart, glue up some, not all of the pieces, and then get to sanding, shaping, and then on to paint. So let's get started. All right, so we've got this thing sanded, got the edges chamfered, got the edges here cut down to a nice look. Everything is looking pretty good. This is all glued up. Gonna fill some of the gaps and things with a little bit of filler putty just to kind of make it look super nice. And then once that's done, then we can get on to paint. Super happy with this. A quick little project, but this thing is going to get a lot of use holding up the computer underneath the workbench and everything. So pretty happy with it so far. All right, so this little computer trolley is all done. So let's take a look at him, yeah? There he is, on little mini casters and everything. So this guy is all done, ready to put the computer and the battery backup in these two spaces, and ready to put this under the desk. Now, if you notice back here in the background, we also refinished this shelving unit. This is the shelving unit that actually goes on top of the workbenches that are usually beside me. So this thing here will also provide some really valuable storage when working on models and pieces and stuff like that. So both of these pieces are ready to go in the studio, so let's get that done. All right, you guys, so here is the computer trolley all done. Computer's all put on top. The battery backup is in there, running like a champ. And man, that's just nestled back in there, right in the corner of my my desk. And man, it just it works really well, and I'm really happy with it. And then you come up here and you look at this unit, and there's just a ton of new space on here that I can put stuff on, and it doesn't interfere with the computer monitor and the keyboard and mouse and all that good stuff. And there's just, yeah, just a lot of really good space. You know, it looks great with the shelving unit, which I've already started to pack full of model parts and spare parts, and you can see my Tamiya paints and stuff like that in there that I still have to put up on their rack and everything. But yeah, it's all starting to come together really nicely, you guys. And I'm very happy with everything, all the results and all that. So yeah, looking pretty damn good. So, as if you couldn't tell by the mess behind me, this place is really starting to come together, and I'm really excited about it. You know, the desk is really close. This shelving unit, I think, is going to provide a lot better storage for, you know, things that I need quickly. The computer trolley down there is a perfect solution to get the computer out of the way, because in this space, it's all about spatial efficiency. And using a corner underneath of my main workbench in the corner of the room is the perfect location for the computer and for the battery backup, the UPS. What is a priority is getting the new bookshelves done to go on top of the big shelves that we have the spare parts and everything on. So I can have the books and the magazines and all sorts of other stuff in there at a quick grab, so I can show you guys on live streams and on videos and things like that. So that's super important to me. But for right now, that's going to wrap it up for this particular episode of this new studio. Come on back next episode. We're going to start working on those bookshelves. But until then, my name is Tim Harkins, the one and only child of Mecha. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.